Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another exciting episode of Let's Talk Comics. I'm your host, Jim Biscardi, and this is the official Image Comics podcast where we go one-on-one with your favorite creators in the business to find out how they got in, why they got in, what they're still doing in comics, and what they've got coming up. If you're new to the show, welcome. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. I'm glad you're here. We have a great show for you today. We are talking to a guest who has, no joke, legitimate, the facts prove this, redefined eras of comics. He has rebuilt universes, he has destroyed universes, and has seen it all. Almost every part of the process when it comes to making comics. But today we're not talking about his work with legacy characters and things like that. We're talking about what happens when one of the biggest creators in comics decides to do something entirely on his own. You know the books. You know what I'm talking about. Geiger, Redcoat, Rook Exodus, Hyde Street. And we're going to talk about Rockefellers. We're going to talk about Hornsby and Halo. We're talking about the books that make up Ghost Machine. We're talking to Geoff Johns. Geoff Johns got together with some of the biggest names in the business to start Ghost Machine. And everything that the Ghost Machine is not just a line of books. Ghost Machine is, as Geoff will say, this is long-term, long game commitments, right? They are building new characters for you to love. They are showing off in every aspect how they can do it with their craft. And these stories will have real endings. When will those endings happen? You're just going to have to listen to find out. I hope you enjoy this one. This one, like I said, we leave no real stone unturned. Obviously, we're when talking to Geoff Johns, we are really just talking about his Ghost Machine stuff. If you want, there's some DC stories mixed in there. Sure, fine, whatever. But okay, I'm letting my bias show. Look, whatever. You're going to enjoy it. I hope you have fun. If you need to get some of the business out of the way, if you want to support the show, you know what to do. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Leave a 5-star rating on Spotify. Take a screenshot. If you are listening to this, take a screenshot. If you're watching, it's on your TV or whatever, take a picture. Share it with us. I would love to share that out to show folks who and where are watching the show. All right. If you're ready, I'm ready. Let's talk comics. Geoff, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jim. It's great to be here, actually. I like that full creator mode. I definitely am, along with my colleagues. We are in full creator mode, that's for sure.
I start all the episodes the same way. Probably a question you've gotten a whole bunch, but with a little bit of a twist. Was comics always the end? Was comics always kind of an end game for you? Is this something that storytelling in general, something that you wanted to do, or is there an alternate universe, Geoff Johns, where he is a drag racer?
I would love to be a drag racer, actually. That's a lot of fun. There is no, it's funny. I've always, so I started out when I was really young, I just loved to draw. I just would draw characters, comic books, and got more into writing as school went on. And then I always wanted to be a screenwriter, but I always wanted to write comic books and TV and film. But my first love, and I would say my end goal, was always comic books. I've always been more starstruck by my favorite comic book creators than I've ever been by anyone else. And yeah, comics are the end goal. It's funny, in Image Comics specifically was the goal. It was interesting I was in school when Image launched in 92. It was I just started college. It was a great time to be reading comic books. And it was exciting with all these new characters and everything. And I'd always been such a fan of Marvel and DC, and clearly spent most of my career, at least, up till this point, working for Marvel, then DC for a long time. And the ambition was always to do and create your own things. I didn't quite realize, I didn't see Ghost Machine in my future. I'd say that. I didn't see this exact kind of landing pad where we would all come together for something that our entire careers were building us towards. And I'm glad it did, because everything we've done, it really has led us to Ghost Machine. It did lead us to Ghost Machine. And so, yeah, comics end goal, that's it. Comics have always been the start and the finish.
I love it. Okay, so when people hear Ghost Machine, right? Like, some people, they think it's, it's an imprint, or it's, it's a brand. And I think it's a little bit, or it's a group of creators who are, making books in Image. And I think it's a little bit of all of that. But for you, in as simple of a way, maybe you think you can, what is Ghost Machine?
Sure. I mean, Ghost Machine is a creator owned and operated company. It's a collective of us. There's a little over 20 of us now in the company. Most of us are creators in some right, and some of us work, in the rest of the business. But we are a company that is, partnered with Image Comics. We publish all our stuff through Image, gratefully and happily. We love working with you guys. And we all own everything together. So we're not like, we're not necessarily like a bunch of creators in a studio doing our own thing. All of us own Geiger. All of us own the Rockefellers. Every single person that's a part of Ghost Machine has owns Ghost Machine, and that's really I think the under the hood and engine of Ghost Machine that makes it work is that we're all in this together. We don't just go off and do our books. We're constantly talking to each other about every aspect of what we do. And we have a very strong, firm North Star or compass that points to quality. We want quality art, writing, paper. We want ongoing stories. We want characters at the forefront of everything. And a commitment. We all are very 100% committed to Ghost Machine and to each other. And I think, Ghost Machine, it can look like, I guess, an imprinted image, but it represents, what it represents to us is ongoing, character-driven, quality books and a commitment to comic book storytelling. That's what we're here to do. We're not here to do miniseries after miniseries after miniseries. We are in it for the long haul with our characters and our universes. And Ghost Machine, it developed very organically out of just, working with Image on creator-owned books. It started with Geiger.
Yeah, no, I want to get to that. I think there are 2 points that you mentioned that I kind of want to follow up on. You kind of mentioned that your core group at Ghost Machine, and like anytime someone like kind of comes into the fold, this is, you all kind of act like you've got folks like Brian Cunningham and Mike Cotton there who are doing great work and editing in some capacity, but like this is when you're bringing folks into the fold, like these aren't editors necessarily casting books. This is talent building the company and the hiring team. And I feel like that's a very important distinction. And so like when you're in that process, right, of like, bringing the team together and all that, why is that distinction really important for you?
I mean, talent is not just a writer and an artist and a colorist and a letterer. Talent is in an editor-in-chief, a publisher. Every aspect of Ghost Machine is about talent and about the person that is a part of the company. A lot of companies out there, they're really the same. They're really editorial constructs, meaning that, and we talk about this a lot, you've got a company that is an editor of some kind, a publisher, some people around that. And what they do is they go outside and they look for talent, right? They look for talent to make books and give them great stories and books to put out there. We're kind of the inverse, is that we are the talent, right? We are the talent that brought in a great editor, right? That brought in a great publisher with Mike, that brought in people like Danny Ward, that brought in Steve Blackwell, who's an amazing designer. We wanted to collect talented, dedicated people that wanted to be part of something, I think, very, very special and very unique. So on the outside, people might think, oh, it's Ghost Machine, it's another company. But the truth is, we're not another company. We are the talent. Every other company our companies, right? Like, and they're all looking for the writers and artists to execute their books and their vision and their boss's vision and their stuff. And what we did is we came together and said, what do we really want to do? And what are the kind of books we want to work on? Who are the characters we want to work on? And who do we want to work with? And so it was more about who do we work best with? We've worked with these people, the team has worked together in some fashion for a long, long time. And some of the people that joined Ghost Machine, we've met along the way, like Danny, but who we met at Comics Pro actually a couple of years ago now, and then recruited her because her passion's insane. But yeah, that's how Ghost Machine's different. We're different under the hood. We like to be like, I like that Ghost Machine can stand for, people can think it's a line of books and characters, 4 universes and everything else, but it's really a symbol of quality books, of character-driven quality books. You're going to get the best paper, the best art, and the best writing that we can possibly deliver, and you're going to get consistent creative teams, because the only place you'll find Brian Hitch or Francis Manipul or me is at Ghost Machine.
Right. So, I'd love to go to some of the early stuff, right? With Geiger. That's a book that, you and Gary Frank, obviously, you're finishing up your work elsewhere. And I think you've said in an interview somewhere, like, you asked Gary, like, what he wanted to do next. And I think he said something along the lines like he didn't want to do superheroes.
Right.
When you get that answer, what does that unlock for you? Because like so much of what your bread and butter had been for so long had been superheroes, in the traditional sense, right?
Yeah,
so like, I'd love to hear how that kind of changes the context for you and what you and him inevitably go do next, which was Geiger.
Sure. I mean, Gary and I, we actually started, I've been a fan of his forever. And I actually requested, when I was working with Tom Brevoort on Avengers so long ago, I was like, he's like, oh, we have an issue that we're going to need to urge for. And I said, oh my God, is there any way we can get Gary Frank? Because I love Gary Frank. And we did. We worked together for 2 issues on Avengers. And I just love his work. And so I would ask him, and then I signed at DC a little while later. They made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I enjoyed working at Marvel. I love Tom. I love the characters there. But they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And I love characters at DC too. And so I signed on, and I would check in with Gary periodically. And it was about, I think 3 years later, I just checked in with him 3-4 years later. And I said, do you want to do Superman? And he was finally free and he's ready to come over. And he said, absolutely. And we started our Action Comics run. I had a great time. And then we did Superman Secret Origin. We did Batman Earth 1, Shazam, and Doomsday Clock. And we worked together at DC from, I think 2004 or 5, all the way through, I think we were finishing Doomsday Clock in 2018. Straight through. We worked on projects. And every book, Superman Brainiac, Batman Earth 1 Volume 3, like Shazam, everything we did together, I could hand those books to anybody in any order. And that was kind of an interesting thing. And Superman was our through line, really, because Doomsday Clock was a Superman story.
Right.
And Gary and I love Superman, like just love Superman. But as we were working on this stuff, we worked on this stuff a lot. And I would go to Italy and we'd work together on things. We planned Batman Earth 1. And we actually, at that point, we were wrapping up Doomsday Clock. And Gary was, I think rightly so, said, I really want to do something that we're under our own, I guess our own oversight on every level, from creative to scheduling to everything. And I said, great. Because we had talks of other projects at the Big Two, and he said that were in process. And I said, great. And I've talked to Eric for years, and he's always been like, come to Image. And so did Kirkman. Every time I would see Kirkman at a show where we'd have a meal together, he'd always be like, when are you going to come to Image? And so I thought, well, this is an opportunity right now, because Gary's didn't want to sign a new contract. He wanted to be free, and he wanted to do something that was non-superheroes. And so we talked a long time about what that would be as we were finishing Doomsday Clock. And we're both fathers, and we both think the world's a crazy, dangerous place. And so we started talking about a character who was protecting their family in a bomb shelter they were stuck in from everybody, and that they would turn into kind of a monster to do it. They would do anything to protect their family. And Geiger grew out of that. Um, and so we did Geiger, and we had a great time with Geiger. And we did, we introduced Junkyard Joe toward the end of that. And in all honesty, like, we were going to do Geiger, and then we were going to go do a big 2-book. We had plans to go do a big 2-book, but we so enjoyed working with Image, and we had such a great time on creating something new. And we thought, well, let's do Junkyard Joe next, actually. Let's do a Junkyard Joe book, and maybe we'll do another Geiger after we do this other book. And then suddenly when we're doing Junkyard Joe, we had this feeling, and we started talking to the other creators, Brian and Jay and Peter and everyone that is a part of Ghost Machine. There were just organic conversations going on because they're like, how's Image? How is it? Right? Because a lot of people had never done it. And Jason was like, that was his end goal from day one. He was like, I want to go to Image. I cannot wait to be at Image. And so as we were working on stuff, like, Jay was like, I like Batman 3 Jokers. We did. They wanted us to do a sequel. We had an idea. And then, because it did so well. And then Jay was like, I want to go to Image too. I'm like, okay. We started talking. And then it just became a conversation among us. And we started talking then, like, and Gary and I were like, we're going to do more Geiger. And we started talking about Image and how we could maybe come together to work with Image in a different way, and do things that would help all boats rise. So that we came together and we started talking about what is a new generation creator owned and operated company look like. And we spent a good 1.5 to 2 years laying it all out. I'm shocked it didn't leak before we announced it at New York Comic Con in 2024. But everyone on board was so tight-lipped, but we had been talking about it for years, and we spent a long time building that engine to make sure that it would work.
What are some of the early what did you learn in that process that maybe came to you as something that you didn't expect, right? Because, like, surely, like, over the course of your career, you have received a lot of advice, you've given a lot of advice, but does any of that prepare you for what you necessarily were walking into and trying to build with Ghost Machine?
It's interesting because I think we all brought everything we had to the table in terms of, because we've all worked at DC and Marvel, Universal Studios, Warner Brothers. Like, everyone came from, publishers and video game companies and toy companies. Like, everyone had a giant resume of experience in every aspect of the business that Ghost Machine is. And we brought that all to the table. And I think, we were in New York in 2024. We had our first summit right before New York Comic Con. Before we announced anything, we actually stayed at this hotel far away from the convention center because we didn't want anyone to see us all hanging out so much.
All hanging out. That's right.
And we hung out. We had this great kind of our first summit, in-person summit. People from across the world came together because we're from everywhere. And I think in that summit, we didn't know each other that well. Like, some of us knew each other working together for a long time, some never met. But by the end of that week, we were a team. And that week what we learned the most is that this isn't just a company. It's a team. It's a family. It's a group of like-minded people from different places with different points of view that all came together with the same goal, is to create a great place where we could create our best work and have it supported and get input from other folks. There are artists on the team that talk to each other about getting advice on designs or layouts or whatever. I'm constantly talking to the other writers. We're constantly talking to each other about every aspect of the business. We talk about why are we going to go with the more expensive cardstock covers, right? Because it takes money out of the budget. It takes money out of profits and revenue of the books. But why are we going to make that choice together? Why do we believe in this? Why do we want ongoing characters? Why are we going to do, we ended up on 4 universes. It was very organic. But I think the biggest surprise was how fun it was and how much the personal relationships between us formed, grew, and became central to everything we do. because it built a level of trust, and you got to have trust in the company. And I remember we were in the room day 2 or 3 of our summit, and there was a point where we all realized there's nobody outside this room that can say anything about what we do. There's no CEO that changes or company that buys it or anything that comes in or new, person in charge that's going to come in and change everything. Because as everyone knows who works or has worked for a company, it happens all the time. It's almost a mystery at the top. Why are decisions being made? And then there's people above them and people above them. And then it kind of ends somewhere in the nebulous Wall Street place, right? And I think the thing that we loved is that we felt more like Image is built, right?
Yeah.
It's built on people. You know who's in charge. You know why, and you also know what the motivation is behind everything. And I think asking the why are we doing anything? Why are we going to continue Geiger as an ongoing? Why are we going to do 4 universes? Why are we going to do this? Why are we going to publish through Image? Why are we going to do anything we're doing? Why are we going to go to New York Comic Con? Why are we going to go to this convention? Everything was a why. Let's answer the why. And I think the biggest thing that we learned was just that we're surprised by was just how personal it was. How personal the conversations, the relationships, and the motivations behind everything was, and how we could meld it into, our business plan, really, of what Ghost Machine could be and became.
Let's talk about the 4 universes for a second, because this is something that I think someone in a different situation would have said, everything we're doing here is one big universe, right? And you guys did not do that. You have a few here, and obviously it allows you to touch on, some different genres and things like that. But can you tell? So I'll name them real quick. So you've got, the unnamed universe that includes Junkyard Joe and Geiger and Redcoat. Rook Exodus exists in its world, Hyde Street, and the stories that take place there, and then the Family Odyssey stuff. What would you say each lane in each universe allows you guys to do creatively?
It's a great question, and we get it all the time. And I think, the instinct is, let's create a big universe of characters that all interact and blah, blah, blah. And I understand that instinct. I think that there's definitely value in that. But I also believe in the creative freedom to tell the best stories. And it's important that that's the first thing we do, is we tell great stories and we let the characters be the best they can be. And working in continuity, and I love continuity, obviously.
Right.
Working in continuity, I always enjoyed it. There are always hurdles. There are always problems. There are always issues that I never talked about. It's just not worth talking about.
Sure.
But there are always challenges with working in continuity when you're among other books and where things are happening and characters are contradicting themselves, and people are vying for storylines that might go against each other, and you have to compromise, and that's fine. That's what the job is. In this instance, we started talking about the books we wanted to do first, and it organically developed. We'd already talked about Geiger and Junkyard Joe and Redcoat being part of that. Like, we already organically talked about the unnamed was our kind of superhero adjacent action genre universe. And it started with the birth of America in 1776 with Redcoat becoming immortal, and it ended with Geiger 20 years from now, or 25 years from now. And so we saw the birth of America and the quote-unquote death of America. And all the characters, Junkyard Joe first appeared in the Vietnam War, all these characters, other characters, Widow Axe, who we're just starting to introduce, and First Ghost, all these characters, they organically fit into this timeline. And we put that timeline in the back of Geiger 6. The original miniseries, Geiger 6, and that timeline's in there. And as the characters got introduced, their logos would replace the typeface that they had. And as the timeline's slowly filling out with the characters we wanted to introduce, and there's connectivity happening, obviously, Redcoat has showed up in the end of Geiger 19, and there's other things that connect the books. But that organically just grew out of that, and it's a very, I'd say, genre hero universe. Right? Not straight capes and tights. It's not straight superheroes. But it has genre to it all. when Jay and I were talking about Rook Exodus, it also took place in the far future on a distant world of terraformed planet. It was very sci-fi. And we thought, well, look, let's let Rook be in its own science fiction universe. Like now we have genre action heroes, and now we have science fiction. We were talking about Hyde Street, and Maytal had some ideas, and it fit into horror. And so we said, you know what, Hyde Street, we're gonna have a horror universe. It made sense for the genre to all tie together. And then Pete and Francis had the Rockefellers and Hornsby and Halo. And what we'll talk about later, we had some other ideas that were going to eventually come out of that book, like the $1 Trillion Kid that I'm working on. And that became more like our, and we'll talk about it with the title later, I guess. But that became more about our hidden in plain sight, like Spielberg, Amblin, E.T., Addams Family, like all those kind of like really grounded, they seemingly normal on the outside, but underneath magical and wonderful and supernatural and extraordinary. It was really like on the front, Hornsby and Halo are ordinary teenagers just trying to figure out their world, but underneath it all secretly, they're the extraordinary daughter of hell and son of heaven who could, if they don't figure it out, could be the signal that tells heaven and hell we should go to war. Like, and that's what, so they all have an identity and a clear tone to their books, and it organically just developed into these 4 universes. And we wanted to really commit to these characters and these universes of characters and these tones, and it made sense. And so that's where the 4 universes came, but it was the unnamed Rook Exodus, Hyde Street, and then what is going to be called soon, obviously, the Unbelievables, which are, the ordinary that are actually extraordinary among us.
Mm-hmm. You've, you're talking about continuity, right? Like you've written and managed, massive kind of shared universe stuff before. And so now with stuff that you are creating from scratch, you build the guardrail. You're building the guardrails where before, the continuity kind of does it, and then, whatever company edicts or whatever. So when you sit down to write now, what's different about your process now than maybe what you had 10 years ago? If there is any.
There always is. It always evolves. I think, your craft always continues to evolve and grow from experience, from the people you work with, from outside forces, influences. I think it can constantly evolves. I would say this is that we're always talking about character. We're always talking about character, and then what's unique about this book, this story, this journey. What's the book about? And it's really important. Why do we tell these books? The why again. Why are we going to do a book? Like, why did Pete and Peter want to do Hornsby and Halo? What are they exploring? And we're exploring nature versus nurture, right? What wins out? And it became something where there's always something to talk about with that, and something to look at through the prism of these 2 characters, these 2 kids. So I guess the thing that we talk a lot about is just the why of it. And we also, by the way, these are ongoing books, but eventually we'll have endings. I remember writing Green Lantern. I wrote Green Lantern for almost a decade. Loved writing it, obviously. And I got to the end. I said, well, it's time to end, I think. And I remember going, I got to write an ending, but there's no ending.
Right.
These books actually don't have endings, right? Those books, you can't do an ending for Batman. You can't, because you can't do an ending for anyone. And look, I was the first to bring characters back to life. Right? I love doing that because I have more story in them. But for us, this is a different storytelling expression. So we actually know what the last issue of Redcoat is. Brian and I don't know the last scene in Redcoat, the last issue. Now that might not be until issue 100 or 150. The same with Geiger and Hyde Street and Rook Exodus and Hornsby and Halo and Rockefellers. The books eventually, they will have an ending, and the ending is the whole purpose of the story and telling the story. So the difference, I would say, is that when we were creating these books and working on these books, like Ivan and I on Hyde Street, we went under and said, okay, who's the scorekeeper? How's this unfolding? What are we going to do? Where's this go? And how are we going to end it? when we get to it, eventually when we get to it. And that was probably the most exciting thing for me as a storyteller, is that we get to tell these stories and they're ongoing. And, who knows, maybe Hyde Street goes 200 issues. We don't know. But ultimately, when we decide to finish telling our story, there will be a specific ending. And I think that's definitely been something that's been different in here, because you can't have a proper ending when you're working with these corporate IP characters, and that's what they're designed to do. That's what they're for.
How do you even kind of map that out without it feeling so mechanical, I guess, right? Because so you kind of know where your ending is, and I guess more of the question I'm asking is where and how do you leave room for surprise? Because I have to imagine as you're writing these characters, you're getting to know them, right? There's things you want to do.
There's tons
that you can't plan for.
There's tons of surprises. And this is the thing that happens in comic books as a monthly comic book. I love characters. It's all about the characters. And there are characters. Geiger surprises me every issue. You think one thing's going to happen and then suddenly it blows open, like organically. Like Ashley Arden, is a character that impacted, that we always knew we were going to introduce her eventually, because she's a contrast to Tariq. We introduced her and she had a massive impact on our storytelling going forward, because we're like, oh wait, this story is going to lead to this story and this story is going to lead to this story. And suddenly the St. Louis Strays became this bigger character in our book. And whereas as originally they weren't going to be as big, and suddenly now they're a big part of the mythology. Or the High Plains Zoo, which we introduced, we're like, oh wait, we got to come back and do this story. So there's always new stories. It's like a tree where there's always new branches growing, right? And reaching toward the sun. And so we aren't locked in and rigid in like, this is every single issue. Brian and I, like originally, I remember we were sitting down, we're like, oh, we got at least, 50 issues of Redcoat. And then suddenly we went and literally had a couple drinks in New York, and we're like, oh wait, we've got issue 75. Oh wait, we've got issue 100. There's so many stories that just develop out of talking about these characters. We leave a lot of room for that. That's organic, but we also know where we're going. So the path isn't narrow as we move ahead. The path is wide, so we can tell the types of stories that grow organically out of this. And some are, some stories we've known since day one, and some stories grow out of a storyline as we're like, wait, let's explore that more and further.
So you mentioned it with Ash Arden, and I know you've said this many times about Simon Pure, that Simon and the characters like that are characters that talk to you. What for you?
Simon sometimes talks too much to me. That character will not. Whenever I start working on an issue of Redcoat, that he just starts talking, and I can't stop him from talking. He's such a fun character to spend time with. And that's really what it is. These characters start to grow a life of their own, and you just spend time with them. And I know what they're going to do. I always know what Geiger's going to do in a situation. So you put them in that situation, they kind of take you through that situation. I know what Pranky's going to do. I know what Direwolf's going to do. All these characters start to speak to you, and they start to move and act in ways that they're almost autonomous in a way when you're working with them, because they start to get more and more defined, and then you're just along the story with them. Often it feels like, I start to get into a scene with two of these characters, like Pranky and Mr. X-Ray, and I'm just in the scene watching these guys interact and delighting what happens and unfolds, because it surprises me, but yeah, they do speak to you. And that's again why I love long form storytelling. I always have. I like living with characters. I like seeing characters grow and change. I like seeing characters be challenged in ways and seeing how they get through it or don't. And so every aspect of the ongoing character, we always talked about it. We want our characters to be ongoing characters, and and that's why, because spending time with them is so fun.
Well, so then what in doing a long run, what are you guys able to do emotionally that maybe you wouldn't be able to do in, say, a miniseries.
You can't do it in miniseries. I have to say, like, you can hit on a few things as an emotional storyteller. For some of these stories, like, look, obviously there's great miniseries out there, and we do
Sure.
do miniseries too, and I think they can tell great stories. But for some of these characters, like Simon and Tariq and X-Ray and Goodbody, like, you actually need more space to
Mhm.
explore the characters and find them through their emotional highs and lows and challenges and, setbacks, and uncover things about them or have them discover new things about themselves. And you need the space for that. The comics are the hardest thing about comics. The great thing is you don't have a budget when it comes to shooting it, right? The
Right.
hardest thing is real estate, because 22 pages is not a lot of space. We often do our stories go over 22. Redcoat often does, because the way Brian lays out the book. But our storytelling with that real estate is so valuable, and emotional real estate is the hardest to get, because if you have 5 word balloons full of emotional dialogue in one panel, nothing reads. You
Mhm.
got to land on their faces. You got to leave room for that a single line from Pranky, especially in issue 12 of Hyde Street, which is my favorite issue thus far. A single line from Pranky needs a close-up, widescreen, big panel of his emotion as he realizes something deep in his heart, because he does
Mhm.
have one, deep in his heart, and it connects with him. If I shoved all these balloons in a single panel, all that emotion would be lost, because the reader's just going to read words and not see the faces. So, you need space for this kind of storytelling, especially emotional storytelling. There's obviously plot, but plot is emotion when it's done right. And plot is, the character's internal journey, finding external, external existence. So you need space for it. And again, that's why I love ongoing books. I like Geiger 6 was an issue just on Barney,
Mhm.
and Barney, like, who is kind of suffering from trauma and trying to, get process it, and how he processes it, how he literally finds his bark back,
Mhm.
how he inspires a group of traumatized and tortured and hunted animals to fight back, and that's him fighting back. And I couldn't do that in a single 2-page scene. I need an issue for that story. If I want to tell it the way I want to tell it and see the emotion of it, I need space for it. And so that is another reason these are ongoing, so we can explore not just our main characters, but the other characters too, like the Nuclear Knight. We have an issue of him coming up, more Junkyard Joe, and you just want the space to, like, even the Rockefellers. I know they've got this great issue that spotlights Rodney coming up. You want the space to be able to tell these character stories, because it is all about the character, and you want to spend time with the characters, and we need that. We need that space. We need that page count, and a single issue is not going to do it, or even a miniseries sometimes.
I'm going to ask you kind of one more question about just actually making comics, and then we'll move on to some of the other books. We'll go to Redcoat next. For you, what would you say is the best piece of advice that you've been given that you feel still kind of resonates in what you do today? And then on the flip side of that, what is something that you feel sometimes creators or aspiring creators, etc., kind of miss when they're just kind of starting out?
Great questions. I mean, it's funny because we always talk about, we should do a Ghost Machine book on writing and illustrating comic books, because we
That's
talk
it.
about
How to write comics the Ghost Machine way.
yeah,
There you
we
go.
talk about craft all the time, and there's certain things I've learned. Some of it through other writers that I
Mm.
was fortunate enough to meet early in my career and become friends with. And one of those was James Robinson. And James Robinson, who's a fantastic writer. I remember early on, I just had started writing Stars and Stripe, Stargirl. For those who don't know, it's my first DC comic was Stargirl. And he said to me, always have your reveals on even pages, meaning your splash pages, your spread. Like, you have to have, like, if you're gonna show a splash page of whoever, the Joker behind a door, well, don't put it on page 3 or 5 or 7 or 9 because your eye sees both pages at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So you always want to pace out your splashes and reveals on the even pages. It's a tiny little thing, but it's a massive difference in the experience of reading a book. And so that I took that to heart, and it used to drive me crazy when DC would shove ads, like a Snickers ad in the middle of the book, and it would throw off my page turn so the splashes would be on the wrong page. But there's little things like that, like very kind of technical, emotional storytelling things that I would learn, and that was one of them. The other thing I thought was really interesting is, and I think a piece of advice I take, and I still do, and I tell everyone this. Jeff Loeb told me this, and he said, when you're done writing a page, look at the page and just ask yourself, if you have that page of original art, would you hang it on your wall?
Oh,
Meaning, if it's two people in a coffee shop talking, you might want to rethink how you're laying that out.
Yeah.
Because that page is never going to sell, right? And meaning that it's a visual medium, so take advantage of that visual medium. And look, sometimes it's easy. When you have Brian Hitch drawing a book, he can draw anything and it looks beautiful. He can draw two people talking on a street and it's breathtaking. But I think there's a lot of merit to that. And so when I would write The Flash or other things, if I actually did have, literally there's a scene, I remember I had Wally and Linda talking in a coffee shop, and they're talking about something. I actually cut to a big shot of what the Flash was talking about was he fought Gorilla Grodd. So in the center of this page is this beautiful shot of the Flash and Gorilla Grodd. And it was that little thing, just to consider it. You don't have to always do it or listen to it, but hey, is there a way to kind of kick up the visual value of this page for the reader? And so there's things like that stuck with me and stick with me. And then there's other things that, like I said, emotion. When you're doing an emotional scene, it's just as important to let it breathe as action is. You got to let the panels breathe. You got to give it, like, not every panel has to have balloons in it or 10 balloons in it. You got to let things breathe. You got to let readers land on something. You want to create tension, you add panels, because your eye is going to fly through this book. People read 10 books at a time sometimes, and they it's like eating a bag of potato chips. They're going to blow by everything. And you want them to feel the emotion of this story, not just the action. You want to marry the action to the emotion. One of the things that used to drive me crazy is you read a comic book and you'd see a scene where it's all emotion and action, and then a scene was just action. There's no emotion behind it. They're just fighting for fight's sake. And so it's there's a lot of weaving together this stuff and consideration that goes into everything that we do. You don't just lay out a book and throw it on there. I remember reading a comic, by the Big Two. This is years and years ago. And the last page was just someone walked in a building, and then the last page was a giant splash of an explosion. And I remember being so annoyed because I'm like, it's just an explosion. It's not fun to look at. And also the character that walked into the building is the lead character of the book. So it was such a false cliffhanger. And cliffhangers, by the way, are also a huge art in of themselves.
Right.
You got to build to a cliffhanger. I love cliffhangers. The last page is the key, into hooking the reader. And it's really fun to do those. But there's so many, I'd say pieces of advice, craft, things that I've learned over the years from others, and then just from looking at comics myself. But I implore anyone who wants to write to read comics they love and just kind of look at how the panels get laid out. I write panel by panel and with the dialogue in it, full script, but Gary and Brian and Jay, everyone I work with has their opinions on, how to tell that story. And sometimes might say, well, hey, I want to add this panel, do this or do this angle. And I always defer to them because they're the director and I'm the screenwriter. And it's a collaboration, but it is how you tell a story is so vital. And, if the story is told right, when you get a black and white, you'll probably be cutting some dialogue.
Love that. That was an incredibly thoughtful answer. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. All right, let's move to Redcoat for a little bit. You, this is a book that, I know you've said before that, or obviously it's set, within, American history. And I know you've described American history almost as American mythology in a sense, right? So how do you balance the real historical events with the crazy stuff you put Simon through.
Well, I mean, Simon and it is like, to me, it's like American history's continuity, right? And there's some characters that aren't that defined, right? There's some characters like that are pretty well defined by history, and there's some that aren't. We might know what they did, but we don't know what they were like, and that's the fun part, I think. And you need to take liberties where it doesn't like disrupt or hurt the story of who these characters or people, were. At the same time, you kind of want to celebrate, just like you would an old comic book character you're bringing back that didn't have a spotlight since like 1973. Well, what makes them special and unique? Don't lose that, And I think that's something that I've always, no matter what I'm doing, I always try and look at a character, in this sense, maybe a historical figure, and say, okay, what were they really about? What did they do? What were they known for? And then get underneath that and say, well, but what were they like? And what emotionally drove them? And how would they interact with somebody else? And so by having Simon Pure be the only, in many respects, the only nonfiction character or fictional character in the whole non-fictional universe of Redcoat, we have the magic. Obviously is, debatable if it existed or not. Maybe it did, but the magic obviously is unique among it. But Simon Pure is an unknown, unnamed character in history. Just about everyone he interacts with is from history, and so balancing that out and having fun with that, and also not ignoring or discounting what these historical figures, who they were. Like Annie Oakley is an amazing, amazing historical figure if you dig into her, as is Johnny Appleseed. And so having, or the Bloody Benders are horrific, a horrific group of characters. But as we explore these, people through Simon Pure, you want to balance out, at least I try and balance out, what they represented, who they were, and then having some fun with it, taking some liberties where it makes sense and doesn't, go in complete contrast to who they were, what they did. Trying to make it as rooted in, fact and historical fact as possible, but yet still be in the heightened world of Simon Pure and Redcoat.
Love that. This is a book, I think, even when it first started coming out, it seemed like fans were surprised at how funny it is. And like that, like, yeah, I mean, look, don't get me wrong. Like there are incredible heartfelt moments that you have with Simon, but the comedy is definitely there. Is that intentional, or is that something that more comes out of, your relationship and getting to know Bryan Hitch?
It's definitely out of, when Bryan and I first were talking about it, it was it still had some humor in it, but it was much more serious. He was like, Simon Pure was a mercenary. And what happened is, Bryan and I had known each other for a long time, but we never worked together. And when Bryan and I started talking about this book and the character, I have a great time with Bryan. I love hanging out with Bryan. One of the things I look forward to the most when we get together as a company is I get to see Bryan Hitch. He is a delightful human being to converse with. We Zoom all the time too with the team, so I see him, virtually a lot. But I just have a ball with Bryan. And when Bryan and I are talking about stuff, working on Redcoat, we just laugh. It's just funny. And so when I'm writing it now, I just think of Bryan and I hanging out. And, the Johnny Appleseed issue, I'm like, this is just us. Like, this is just us getting in trouble if we had magical apple seeds and, powers and stuff. And it was about friendship, and it was about, it was about that Johnny Appleseed. It's a very emotional issue to me, even though it's funny, because it's literally Bryan and me in a lot of ways. Is, it's hard to find really good friends as you get older, and to find somebody like Bryan, who not only do I respect tremendously when it comes to his talent, but to work with him and collaborate him in a way that is so delightful. That's the word for it. The book can't help but be delightful. Redcoat to me is like that warm kind of hug when you read that book. There's always something in it that's
perfect way to explain it.
It just makes me feel good to work on that book. It's like Christmas morning to work on that book. It's like hanging out with a friend and having a drink, at sitting at the bar and telling stories, working on that book.
Mhm.
That book to me is a surprise. I
Hmm.
didn't realize how much I would enjoy working on that book and with Simon, but boy, oh boy, am I glad that Brian and I waited to work together until Redcoat, because I've told Brian this, that book, it just wouldn't exist without either one of us. It wouldn't manifest. It is a true amalgamation of us in that book. And I love it. It's such a fun book to read, and that's why, honestly, that we've come up with so many stories for it. We have so much ahead. We've plotted this thing, and it's all character driven. It's all character driven, and it's all has a point to it. And Simon's journey is emotional. It's very funny, but there's so much emotion, so much, and there's some real tearjerker issues coming up in year 2 and 3, as well as ones that'll make you laugh with tears.
Sure.
But yeah, it's that book's, I mean, they're all really, really special. That book probably in particular has evolved to a different place than I think Brian or I originally thought it would, because the tone of it has certainly gotten much more delightful, I would say.
I think that's going to lead us to the Northerner is a character that obviously you have been seeding for a while, and then we get to kind of see him quite a bit in Redcoat, and just finished up today as we're recording this an arc in Geiger. Who is the Northerner in this larger unnamed kind of mythology?
I'd say the Northerner is one character. We've got, I guess, part 2 came out today. It goes another couple issues. I think the Northerner, his name is, I mean, you learned this in the Geiger issues. Gary and I have worked on this for quite a long time. Like, Geiger to me is in a lot of ways Simon's kind of a release in one way, and Geiger's this release in another, because I think Geiger represents this duality of being a father, or even just a family member, because there's you love and care for your family so much. There's this strong heart that Geiger has, such a big heart. It's huge. And yet he can also have such an ability to evoke and unleash violence. And I think the contrast of those with Geiger is what makes Geiger such a fascinating character to be with, because he cares so immensely, but he will, screw things up or F things up for people too.
Right.
And I think that release for him is really interesting, and a great contrast for Malcolm North, who's a very methodical, super serious character who doesn't emote very much either way. He doesn't get angry, he doesn't seem to get overly emotional, but he's very thoughtful in terms of what he's doing. And the Northerner first appeared obviously in Redcoat in the Civil War to stop some people from helping the South win the Civil War. So that's what he said and what he's sent to do, and he does it with Simon. He's accidentally thrown into the future, Geiger's future, where he meets Geiger, and he starts to suspect it was for a reason. Why was he drawn to Geiger? Why was he sent to Geiger? He's not sure yet. And the group that he works for is the Department of Historical Preservation. And he doesn't know much about this group. He was recruited to this group, but he comes from a 1964 when he was first approached by these people, where the South won the war and the world was vastly different. And he's told like he's going to be selected and recruited to go back in time to prevent those trying to have that helped the South win, to prevent them from doing it. And he seems to have done that. And now he's in Geiger's time wondering, well, what's next? And he starts to hear about the unknown war. And he says, well, am I supposed to stop this? Is this why I'm here, to learn about it? And Geiger thinks, of course, he's nuts. And, that timeline and the Northerner's name has been in Geiger 6 since issue 6 for a reason. The original miniseries is that the Northerner is a bit of the guide through that timeline in some respects. And so he becomes and is becoming a real central figure to the ongoing saga of the unnamed and what it'll mean. He's going to, I don't want to spoil everything, but he's going to be a very important part of the books, all of the books going forward.
Love that. All right, let's we'll keep trucking along. We got to talk Rook for a little bit, and I think the thing I love the most about Rook, and the thing that intrigues me the most, is the world building in Rook is very different than what you're doing in, say, Redcoat, right? Where Redcoat is playing around and kind of bending history a little bit, and Rook is truly kind of starting from nothing. What are the different creative muscles there, right?
Well, with Rook, by the way, I have to give a huge shout out to Brad Anderson, our colorist, and Rob Lee, our letterer, who are part of the company, and they do all of it on all the books I work on. And Rook, because I was just looking at Rook as you said that, Rook is such a gorgeous book, and the palette of that book is vital to why it looks so good with Jay's insane artwork. But Brad and Rob were also brought in because, like everyone else in Ghost Machine, they are so vastly talented, the best colorist and letterer in the business. They should own part of a company. They should be valued for what they contribute to what we do. And like I said, the highest quality is what we care about, not quantity. We don't need to publish 90 books a month. We want quality. And quality doesn't come from just you happen to own a character that's popular. Quality comes from the people you're working with and that work on the character. I mean, I think too often people rely on like, well, everyone loves this character, and they do, and they'll buy it even if the book sucks. We don't do that, and I think that's part of the thing that we love about the audience that we've built in our building. They're there not because they love Geiger since they were 10 years old. He didn't exist unless there's, a 14-year-old kid reading it. Maybe there are a lot of them, but the quality of the books and the creators on there, and Rook is of the utmost quality, I think. And Jay is meticulous when it comes to that book and that title. I think people know, or who've at least dug a little bit in the origins of where Rook came from. Rook Exodus was was Jay and I were talking about Image, and Jay was like, I have this character I designed. I don't know who he is or what he does or where he's from or anything. And he had this character with the helmet on. So that's a really cool design. Let's talk about story, though. We started talking about story and everything, and then it kept circling back to this design. I said, Jay, just give me tonight. I want to spend time with this because it was really cool. But and we talked about a lot of different things we loved in comics. What do we want to do? What do we want to create? And so we thought we'd be very unambitious and create a whole world with a huge mythology behind it. That is the hardest book to write in the world. But we reconvened the next day, and it was all about like, let's talk about our connection with animals and nature because it's absent. We've removed ourselves. I don't know, most of you listening, maybe you look around you in the room you're in or the car you're in or wherever you're listening to this and see what is alive besides people by you. And maybe there's a plant or a pet, but I'd probably guess that most people don't have a lot of nature around them, and we've removed ourselves. And whenever we thought of sci-fi and Star Wars and Blade Runner, a lot of times you're in these giant cities that are just all devoid of nature or
concrete jungles.
Yeah, concrete jungles. And we wanted to go the opposite. And one of the movies I loved was Leonardo DiCaprio and The Revenant, and that great like pioneer, like American frontier survival, and we were really inspired by that and saying like, let's get back to our connection with nature. And what if there's technology like this helmet that was designed and invented and manufactured to do that, to connect us back with nature. And we arrogantly thought that we could just control it even more than we do now. And the truth is, when you're really connected with nature, it influences you as much as you influence it. And we just started with that. And then we got into the fight and flight of it all. It's like some days, I don't know about you, but there's some days that I'm here and wow, I could wish I could start over on a new planet. It's so messed up. Like, I wish I could just go somewhere and start over. And that's what Rook did. And a lot of these people did. And guess what? The same problems kind of came up because they didn't address them. And so now it's all about, hey, you know what? Maybe we need to stay and fight for our world, our planet, ourselves, our families. Like we need to stay and fight, not run away from the problems, not just start over, because if we don't address them and face them, we're just going to be back to square one. And I think that that's what Rook, for us, what Rook became. And at the same time, it was really fun because we all have a favorite animal. And it was like, well, who's the warden of bears? And who's the warden of wolves? And suddenly we just started to explore that. Who's like, I mean, we're not going to talk about it now, but there's some more Rook news coming out later this year. And that's, we're going to be exploring a lot of the other wardens, and they all have their own stories. They all have like why they were recruited from Earth, what their animal is, what that means, what their relationship is, what their motivation is, what they want. And when you start to look at all the different kinds of animals, your characters, your wardens kind of become endless. We have ideas for and characters that we're going to be introducing that are really examine something really thoughtful, like Stag, who we've introduced in this new arc, or terrifying, like Arachnid, the spiders, or coming up something that's, I think that's even like I'm introducing the warden of Wales, and what is that? What's that story like? What is that story? And it's a really thoughtful story about regret. And so every one of these characters just starts to explore something. So Rook developed really out of Jay's passion and his and that just initial sketch, and it turned into this beautiful, I think really unique, really I think it's going to be a book that really stands the test of time, that book. You look at that.
Is there a warden of your favorite animal yet? And if there isn't, don't say what it is, because now I want to see. Is your favorite animal a warden yet? Okay.
There's not. My favorite animal, I'll just say when I was a kid, is a giraffe. So I'm not sure how quick I'll get to the warden of giraffes eventually. But I just like giraffe because it had a G like me and it said the same thing. I'm like, oh, cool. There's another word out there like my name. But I loved giraffes when I was a kid.
And I may put you on the spot a little bit because I don't know, and if it's a spoiler, we can just move on. One of the things I've seen asked a lot for fans who read the book is they're really curious: do dinosaurs exist in the world of Rook?
I can't say anything else about anything else.
Fair. That's fine. Okay. I'd love to hear a little bit about because you're talking about like just how massive in scope Rook is and how expansive it could be. Why is that important for this world as opposed to potentially telling the story a little bit more on a smaller linear track?
I like scope, right? So does Jay. I always say like I want a tapestry that I paint my character story across. When I was on Green Lantern, it was a tapestry was space, right? I could paint my story across this huge tapestry of space. In The Unnamed, it's America, both in Geiger and Simon, their stories. With Rook, I like having a world to explore, and the story and the context of the story and the meaning of the story don't work if I do it in a small way. Rook just demands to be epic in scope. It demands to have that vast tapestry behind it. So there was never any, we never even considered anything but, what Rook is. Like when we started talking about the book, Jay and I were really like, this is what it is. And it never was like, let's make it bigger or smaller. This is what the story demanded.
With my last question for you is, look, one of the things, you started at the very beginning where you're saying Jay had a really cool design, but you wanted to dig into the character. I'm not gonna lie, those designs are friggin' incredible. Like they're so great. Was there one that outside of the main character, which one of the wardens? Because I know they're all your favorite. It's like picking your favorite child, but like which one of the wardens, when you saw the design for it, you were like, "Oh shit, that's it."
I won't say they're all my favorite. They are, but the designs, like specifically, I mean, look, Ursaw's design is insane, because he's so formidable and intimidating. You know, the original design was just Rook only is the first design. That was the only design that we went off of. He had a long coat and a helmet, and that was really impressive because it was just cool. But every time I get a design from Jay, like he's designed a lot of the wardens that some of you haven't seen yet. They're all very compelling. I really do like Stag. I think Stag, the antlers on his helmet and the way Jay's approached him as kind of this samurai warrior. I think he's probably, he's probably absolutely one of my favorite designs, if not my favorite. I just like that. The look of that character is really cool.
It's a great
the red helmet. It looks cool.
Yeah. I think one of the things I also love about it is for something that takes place very clearly in a very big sci-fi setting, Jay's designs also feel practical in a sense where like the masks feel like they are masks, right? Like they don't.
I mean, Jay actually has built like 3D models of some of these masks. Like,
oh, really?
Complicated. And that was one of the things we really tried with the storytelling is we wanted to feel like relatable. In issue 1, he's like eating pizza in a pizza parlor. There's bikes. There's, there's apartment buildings. There's, fish and rivers. The animals are from Earth. They've all been ported over like Noah's Ark. They brought as many as they could. So, that is deliberate. We wanted everything to feel as real and grounded and relatable as possible so that you saw Earth. You saw things that you knew, and then the helmets were other, right? The helmets and some of the tech are other, but everything else, the environments they're things we've seen before, and that's something important for us.
All right, we got to talk about Hyde Street, your little horror corner of what you've got going on at Ghost Machine. Is doing Hyde Street basically therapy for you? Is this where you exercise all the demons? And
it's actually comes from my love of horror. I grew up loving Twilight Zone and Universal Monsters, and I have always loved kind of horrific characters. And I love shows like Black Mirror, but also like shows like Lost and Severance that have ongoing characters that have a mystery behind it all. So it's kind of an exploration of all of that. And it's just something I've never been able to do is focus on horror characters. And I think that much like Redcoat's, about history, like it allows me to do something I never could do with superheroes. It just doesn't, it never fit with me with what I was doing there. So Ivan Reese and I spoke about what we wanted to do. I was like, what about something with horror? And he was like, I started in horror. His first comics were horror. So we just started talking and riffing and coming up with all these ideas and characters. And there's a big mythology behind Hyde Street, what it actually is, why it exists, who's behind it, everything. And that's going to be slowly, you actually start to learn a little bit more about it in the very next issue. But that's actually the big story is what really is Hyde Street. And the nature of it and the meaning behind it and the reason for it. And we have a story we're telling with these ongoing characters called The Residents, for those who don't know it. Every decade, somebody's chosen to become a permanent fixture on Hyde Street, this place where it exists kind of, just around the corner, off the alley or street or behind your house. Like you can get to Hyde Street kind of any way if you've done something bad. And these people called the residents who live there, who are there permanently, they seek you out and essentially destroy your soul and serve it up to the person keeping them there, called the scorekeeper. And each one of them is brought there and told they need to deliver the scorekeeper 10,000 souls, and then they'll be given a second chance at life. They'll be returned to Earth with their greatest desires fulfilled, a deal with the devil, so to speak. And so these characters, though, we have just a wide variety of characters. We have an actor, a typecast monster actor from 1949 called the Matinee Monster. His name's Oscar Oddman. We have a Boy Scout from the 50s named Pranky. It's my favorite character. An advertising executive named Mr. X-Ray from the 60s. A fitness instructor from the 80s named Miss Goodbody. Plastic surgeon from the 90s named Dr. Ego, and so on and so on and so on. So we have all these characters. Sisterhood, from the 1920s is a fortune teller. But all these characters from different eras that represent their decade in a way and personify a fear from that that time. And so it's been a
it's
lot of
a
fun for Ivan and I to delve into a little bit of what we did in Blackest Night, is
right.
find the horror element of storytelling and create what we hope are a new generation of iconic, horror characters.
I think it's a fascinating look at like the human condition, right? Like I think like a lot of the horrors are actually very, they're very human, and I think one of the things that I love about this series is how you and Ivan handle tension. And I think like and like we were talking about how, being able to kind of control the page turn and all of that, and how dialogue kind of flows and works. And I think like it works on a completely different level here than say some of the other books that, that you're doing. How can you talk me through a little bit about that? Like what is writing tension harder than anything else, or is it just different?
Different. It's just different. I think what we've done with these books, like what I think I enjoy the most is that they're also vastly different in tone, pacing, character. Hyde Street, Rook, Redcoat, and Geiger couldn't be more different. And so every time I dive into one of them, it does feel like I'm living in a different space. Every one of them is fun to live in and different reasons, but there's different way to build tension or horror. Or I think Hyde Street's kind of a quirky, odd book. The characters are like that. There's some humor in it, dark humor, and there's even heart in it. But building tension and horror it's a different thing to do. And surprising people and it's totally, it's just a different world to live in, but it features the same kind of, character journey, characters at the center of it as the other books. But I
do want to give a moment to shout out Maytal, because she's
did a great job on Sisterhood.
Yeah, and so was Maytal, like, was she part of the whole thing from the very beginning, or was she someone who you brought in?
No, Maytal's been around she's a TV writer I knew, and she had these ideas that I thought were just great, and we started talking about Ghost Machine, and we also want new voices among our creative group, and having Maytal be a part of it and a founder, that comes from another medium. Just like, by the way, Brad Meltzer, novels, and Lamont from television and film. So we have writers that came in from other aspects of it that bring a lot to the table. And Maytal was really excited about the potential of it. And she, I think, between Devour and Sisterhood, has really delivered some great books with unique stories and characters. And it's been a lot of fun to work with her on this.
Nice. All right, let's go to the big announcement. Who are the Unbelievables?
Unbelievables. Well, who are the Unbelievables? So this is a crossover, a storyline that it's our first crossover, Ghost Machine, and it's it starts with Hornsby and Halo 0 and the Rockefeller 0, which come out, and I
love a good Zero issue.
Yeah, great, like Zero issues, and they kind of reintroduce and reestablish who Hornsby and Halo are and who the Rockefellers are, but also start to peel back the layers of somebody that's watching them, that's keeping tabs on them, that calls them the Unbelievables. And the Unbelievables are, as I said earlier, there's people with extraordinary abilities and beginnings and origins that are hiding in ordinary lives, like the Rockefellers, who are a family from the future pretending to be a normal family, or Hornsby and Halo, who are discovering they're actually the spawn of hell and heaven. But they're kids in Warwick, New York, who are just trying to figure out their life, and now are told that their relationship will ultimately decide the fate of the world. But there are others out there, and there's a character named Tommy Townsend III, we call him the $1 trillion kid. He's the world's first trillionaire. He's 13 years old, and we launched right out of the Zero issues, $1 trillion kid number 1. And $1 trillion kid number 1 introduces Tommy and the concept of the Unbelievables, of how these characters are all connected, and they're across. He has them across America right now, and there's different, and you'll see them in some of these. There's a map that he's tracking, but Tommy Trillionaire is tracking them for a very specific reason in the books. And it goes from $1 Trillion Kid number 1 to Hornsby and Halo 14, Rockefeller's 13 is part 3, and then $1 Trillion Kid number 2 is part 4. And this story will have the first time that these characters meet and become aware of each other. And we become aware of the other unbelievables out there, and that will start to be explored in these books, in both Hornsby and Halo and Rockefeller's as we move forward. But like I said, the tone of it is very Spielberg in its, I think, groundedness of normal, everyday people, at least seemingly, actually being quite extraordinary. And we're exploring all sorts of different, we'll have more announcements on the unbelievable soon, but we'll be exploring all sorts of different, I guess, universes or realities in these books. I'm really excited for it. It's been a lot of fun to work on it. You know, Pete and I got to work on Green Lantern and Green Lantern Corps for years. So to work together again, writing together again was really fun.
There's a line for Tommy Trillionaire that I think like it's a very good tagline, right? Like he's chasing the one thing money can't buy.
Yes.
What's the, I guess, and what's the emotional engine on that one?
Well, the thing is, this kid Tommy has all the money in the world. He has all these. He's an inventor too. He's the richest kid in the world, and he can buy and do anything. In the first issue, we see that he's replaced the school buses in his town of Cherry Pit, Michigan, with a roller coaster that all the kids ride to school. And so the roller coaster. So he's trying to make his whole thing is like life needs to be more fun. So I'm going to use everything I have to make it more fun. But he has a secret that we'll learn in the issue, that it is money can't buy everything. And I think each one of these books, The Unbelievables and beyond, even Geiger and Redcoat and all the other books, but The Unbelievables, every one of these titles is all about exploring something specific, that there is a reason we can only tell Tommy's story, the $1 Trillion Kid story, with Tommy. Like, we can only tell Hornsby and Halo's story, like Rose and Zach, their story of nature versus nurture, and like, what is it and what is your future, and how much control over yourself do you have and what you're going to become. That's their story, very specifically. And the Rockefellers is all about literally learning to live in the present. Like, how do you live in the present and enjoy the now? And so every one of these titles in the Unbelievables universe specifically has a thematic and exploration through a character or characters. And all the ones that will be introduced additionally, Genie, Invaders Y'all, there's the Curious Creatures of Dr. Moreau. Like, there's all these other great characters that are there, and every one of them is exploring a different facet of life, a different part of the human condition, even when they're not human. And that's what I love about the books and the characters that we've all teamed up with. And it's been me and Peter Tomasi, Peter Snaberg, Francis Manipul, Ivan Reese, Brian Cunningham, and Mike Cotton. We've all worked on this expansion of these two books, and the Unbelievables universe. We were always going to open the door, but we decided to open it up even bigger. I think Hornsby and Halo and Rockefellers are two of the most underrated books on the stands. The first trades are out. So it's a perfect time for us to introduce the next character with the $1 Trillion Kid and start to open the doors and the pathways to everybody else. But I'm excited for people to see these, the Unbelievables map, to hear more about it, to read $1 Trillion Kid number 1, and really see just how big and how wonderful and magical this universe of characters are, this fourth universe we have, the Unbelievables universe, and where it's evolving into. I'm really excited for people to check it out.
I think that's one of the, one of the big kind of themes I think of this chat is how, there's a lot of scope even amongst these books, but what you guys have been able to do is make it not seem like homework and make it incredibly relatable. And I think like you said, you get between the four universes, there truly is a little bit of something for everyone and multiple things for people to pick up. And,
I agree. There's something for everyone and there's something for everyone, and everyone can have everything. Like, so that's right. To me, and that's why we do keep our title list low, our count low. We don't want to have too many books out there. We want people, if they want to buy everything they can, if they want to just buy a few, that's fine too. But we want to make sure that when they see Ghost Machine on there, when they know it's a Ghost Machine title, they know at the very least it's going to be feel good in their hands because of the quality of the book paper and the covers. It's going to look beautiful, and it's going to be a good read that's focused on character. That's really just our tenets are just, again, we want it to be undeniably good.
Mm-hmm. I think the you mentioned it a few times, like the quality of these books, like not just the story quality, but the actual material quality. Reading these books is like holding a Ferrari in your hand. Like it is, you've got a really, like I said, it reads nice in your hands with the cardstock covers, the papers, and like this is all stuff that you are, that you guys are picking and choosing because like you want readers to have a quality read. Like I said, like you pick up one of those books off the stands, it feels special compared to potentially something else you may be picking up. And
that's our goal is to make our books worth your money and time.
Yeah.
That's it.
Amazing. There is another project I definitely wanted to talk about, but I want to talk about that when we get a little bit closer to it. We do have to talk about First Ghost at some point, and how that kind of ties into everything. Yeah. But I feel like we can talk about that and how it fits into everything else for a whole nother hour down the line. So we'll do this again soon. And do it there. But Geoff, man, this has been an absolute blast. Like I said, I think you and I have only gotten to know each other for the little bit that I've been here at Image, and it's been awesome to see the work you guys have been doing, the way the fans have been reacting, the way retailers have been reacting. Like these are great books, and it shows.
It's been, I have to say, it's been a dream for all of us and me to be at Image. It's been great working with you and the team and Eric and Robert and everyone there. It's nice to be at a place where it is all about the creator and not about the corporate. I just think it's so refreshing for us to be able to make the best decision because it's the best creative decision. And that is, you wouldn't know how rare that is elsewhere.
It's fun to see you guys get to play. Like you guys took part in the Youngblood team up covers, the Invincible team up covers. Mm-hmm. So to get to see like, your characters intermingle with other parts of, just the Image line has been awesome. And so like you said, like they're not only are you guys telling super stories, we get to have some fun too. So, yeah, it's like I said, can't wait. It's awesome. For those who are looking to get into Ghost Machine books, there are plenty for you to get into. There are deluxe hardcovers that you can grab. There are multiple volumes of trades of each of the series. And it's one of those things where you can literally just jump in, catch up, and keep rolling. Every new arc that these guys are doing are incredibly new reader friendly, more so than I think if you were to pick up a new arc of some other superhero books or whatever. And I think every one of them is a great kind of jump in point, and then just do what every comic book fan does best: work your way back and forward at the same time. And then, like I said, there's going to be a lot of fun, cool stuff coming up with the Unbelievables, and we're excited for that. And then, Geoff, we're pretty much on the road to San Diego Comic-Con at this point. I know it's February, but it's going to be here before we know it.
Very fast, and I will see you there.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Folks listening, you guys know the deal. If you loved hearing what we had to talk about today, do me a favor, tell someone about the show. Take a screenshot. If you're listening on your phone, share it on social media. We'll share the heck out of it. If you want to support the show even further, leave a review on iTunes. Leave a 5-star rating on Spotify. You can leave a comment on Spotify. I don't care. Just go tell someone who loves comics about the show, because I guarantee you they will find something new to read, something to love. And we'll all have a good time here. So, as long as you guys keep buying and reading comics, we get to keep talking about them. We'll catch you guys next time.
Thank you.